The breakdown starts right now. Greetings and welcome to The Breakdown. I'm Tara Setmayer, and believe it or not, the Rick Wilson has taken a long overdue vacation. So it's just you and me tonight, but we have a great guest for you. Hugo Lowell, he is the congressional reporter and January 6th extraordinaire for The Guardian. He's going to join me tonight because we have really not talked about January 6th in a while, and the hearings are coming up. So I thought this would be a great opportunity to do a preview because the hearings start next week. And there's a lot going on. So stay tuned for Hugo. He'll be joining us in a couple of minutes. But first, you know what it is. It's Tuesday, which means last week in the Republican Party. Roll it.
This one is about the MAGA rallies, the presidential rallies that President Trump is so famous for.
He said every child's name that was shot and rang a bell for them. Now, that is what a president does.
What about getting a department that can look at young men that's looking at women, that's looking at just social media? What about doing that, looking into things like that, and we can stop that way?
This is not about virtue cycling and signing.
Fear of being stigmatized.
Fake meat that grows in a Peachtree dish.
And there are 300-something million people, 400 million guns. You don't see that as a problem?
No.
Let me tell you the truth about the enemies of the Second Amendment. They are schooled in the ways of Marx and Lenin.
These are the exact same people that want to murder unborn children in the womb by dismemberment all the way up to birth. But yet now all of a sudden we're supposed to believe that they care about children.
It's the gun-free school zones, Tucker. Those are the biggest problems.
At the end of the day, we're going to look at the people who do these acts. We're going to convict them. And we're going to punish them.
Sir, you can't convict him. He was killed.
He's dead.
He was killed along with 19 children in the school behind me.
Hi, I'm Mike Crispy, and I'm running for U.S. Congress because we need to put election integrity first. That starts with ending ballot drop box.
He's a tough guy. He doesn't want to do it. He doesn't want to run into a nest of illegal aliens that happen to like knives very much.
There has been still no evidence or proof provided that there was any sort of fraud in that.
Well, no, that's wrong. I don't know why you people in the media keep saying that, but that is absolutely false.
Whoa, boy. Where to start? Well, first of all, it blows my mind that after the tragedy last week, the last time we were together live, we found out the tragic news of what happened in Uvalde, Texas, in this school shooting, and it was unfolding, and we've learned a lot since then. And the discussions that are going on about, how can this be prevented? What can we learn? What needs to change? These are all things. When there's a tragedy like that, we need to come together and find some type of middle ground. And it's very difficult to do that, no matter what side of the Second Amendment debate that you're on. We're a gun-owning home. I believe strongly in the Second Amendment, but I also think that there are things that need to be done that can common sense things to prevent some of the tragedies that we've seen happen. And these Republicans and the NRA and Trump and all of them, what they're doing, it's not helpful. They're not coming to the table in good faith. And, we see the in last week in the Republican Party, some of the nonsense that they're talking about. Meanwhile, kids are dying at the hands of people who shouldn't have their hands on weapons of war. I'm sorry. If you're wondering why I'm in a hotel room, it's because I'm in New York. I'm guest hosting The View again this week. And we had a big discussion about that this morning as well, the police response and things like that. And these are serious issues. And the Republicans are not serious people. Do you hear what they're talking about? They're not serious people. blaming porn and everything else on it. It's ridiculous. Trump mispronouncing names and the weird bell thing at the NRA. Like, it's just so weird, and it's very unsettling. And I'm not confident that major changes will happen. But I am hoping that some of the Republicans who are seemingly coming to the table in good faith will see, I'll believe it when I see it, to try to change some things to prevent tragedies from this happening again. And I'm happy to see the DOJ opening an investigation into the failures of the response there. In the meantime, there's a grieving community in Texas, and I just still want to let them know that we are praying for them and praying for healing in that community, because it's going to take a long time. On another note, I want to preview Thursday's show before we get into some of the other headlines. Randy Rainbow will be here Thursday. If you don't know who the incomparable Randy Rainbow is, Google him, go to YouTube and watch his political parody videos. He is a national treasure, an immense talent. For the Trump years, he kept us all sane with his unbelievable parodies of Trump and the Trump years and the cast of characters there. And he's a one-man shop. He does all the editing, producing, and performing himself. So Randy will be with me on Thursday. So be sure to tune in for that, because he is a hoot. And, you know, it's been a little intense around here lately, and it was time to kind of lighten things up a little bit. So make sure you tune in on Thursday for Randy Rainbow. All right. So headlines before I bring in Hugo. January 6th, there's some stuff going on here. And as we ramp up to next week's hearings, the usual suspects, you've got McCarthy and Biggs and Jordan, Scott Perry, Mo Brooks. They've all declined to testify. They're still saying F you to the committee. And I don't know why. They have nothing to hide. Why wouldn't they just come out and tell the truth? We'll ask Hugo what he thinks about that. We also have a new poll out that shows that Liz Cheney, who's the vice chair of the January 6th committee, she's got a political battle on her hands. It's not looking good for her right now in the primary, but, you know, things can change. But this is a pretty significant battle, because this is people who support insurrectionists versus people who don't, people who support the Constitution, people who don't. MAGA and democracy do not go along. They do not go hand in hand. And they're targeting the Liz Cheneys and the Adam Kinzingers. It's why he's not running again. We'll see what happens there, but they're targeting her. And the MAGA people, the election lie fraud people, are very well organized, and they're very well funded. And we cannot underestimate what they are doing in their little evil workshops, figuring out how they're going to undermine our election next time. Everything that they accuse us of, they are doing. The projection, we say this all the time, but it's so true. I'll give you an example. The New York Times just had a story talking about Cleta Mitchell. Who is Cleta Mitchell? Cleta Mitchell was the preeminent election lawyer for Republicans for decades. And when I was part of the party and in conservative circles, everyone knew Cleta Mitchell and respected her. She was, a tough cookie, and she was there to protect election integrity and all this. Now, she's just as bad as the rest of them. She has gone off the deep end. She was right there during the whole election fraud stuff, during the developing ways to undermine the election. She recruited John Eastman, for goodness sakes, the election coup memo author, that guy. Yeah, they're all in cahoots. And Cleta Mitchell is out here now holding seminars and workshops across the country to recruit and teach volunteers, poll watchers, election integrity watchers to go out there and basically harass the elections in their communities. They're doing it under the guise of election integrity, but she's training these people into doing very aggressive, like, surveillance and harassment of election officials. This is not a joke. They are very well funded, and we're talking thousands of people. And the New York Times, I encourage you guys to go check it out. I mean, they did a whole story about this and how what she's using in her workbooks to train people is very, very deceptive. It's misleading, and it's going to cause chaos going into the next election cycle. we're going to get a preview of this in the midterms, but this is all about 2024. And she is out here talking about we're going to take our elections back. Sound familiar? Take back our country, take back our schools, take back our elections. Well, what does that mean? In this day and age, it has very, very nefarious undertones. I don't like it. But this is what we're up against. And this is why we need to make sure that we have folks that can counteract these organizers, because Republicans, I'm telling you, they're very good at grassroots organizing. It's also why, if you haven't signed up, sign up for the union. Lincoln Project's incubating the union, which is a clearinghouse. If you want to volunteer for various things concerning the elections and getting involved, go check out the union, because there's different organizations. There's dozens that are helping to do this, because without all of us doing it, God only knows what the MAGA army would be left to their own devices and what they'll do. So that's my little plug for the union. But I saw that story about Cleta Mitchell, and I just went, oh my goodness gracious. These people are not letting up. They are not letting up. Not only are they not letting up, they are going full steam ahead. Even though they were repudiated in the courts, we all know that the 2020 election was free and fair. They are not repudiated at all. They are emboldened, and they have the pedal to the metal, and they're not stopping. So we cannot either, which leads me to what's happening with January 6th, because all of this it's all tied together. And I worry that the country is getting fatigued with all of this, because it's just so much. We're bombarded, right? The fire hose of fuckery. Sometimes it just overwhelms you, but with everything else going on in the world. But this is really incredibly important, which is why I wanted to bring on Hugo Lowell with The Guardian to talk about January 6th and give us a rundown of what to expect next week once these hearings start to kick off, and kind of where we are, give us a status check. So let's bring him on in. Hugo Lowell, he has the distinct honor of being a congressional reporter and on the January 6th beat for The Guardian. I've gotten to know your work, Hugo, because of your tweets, and I follow you on Twitter, so I began reading you. And also I've been a source in some other stories and given some quotes from some of your colleagues. So I'm thrilled to actually have you and be able to talk to you, because you're doing incredible, intrepid reporting on January 6th. So welcome to The Breakdown.
Hi, well, thanks for having me, and thanks for the kind introduction. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. Well deserved. So Hugo, next week, right, June 9th, these hearings are supposed to kick off. And tell us a little bit about this. What are we to expect here? What is the structure going to look like? How many hearings are we supposed to have? Are they going to be in prime time or not? I think a lot of us haven't really been able to keep track of exactly what's happening and who's leading it all.
Yeah, so there's, at the moment, according to the schedule released last week to us, it was a draft schedule. The plan is to have 6 hearings, 2 in prime time, with 4 sandwiched in between that are going to be around 10 a.m. Starts on June 9th, ends June 23. Now, that could still change, and I think the committee is still trying to figure out what the correct kind of format should be, what's the best way they can tell the story of January 6th to the American people. And so they're still trying to figure out, the witnesses, when they want to do certain hearings, which members are normally going to lead the hearings. But the plan that they are nearing is to have a member from the select committee lead each of the hearings, but then have the council, the investigative council from the different investigative teams within the select committee lead the questioning of witnesses. And what they effectively want to do is to show through the testimony and through having images and exhibits flashing up on the screens in real time as the witnesses are testifying. They want to tell the story of how Trump effectively broke the law in order to return himself to office on January 6th.
So this sounds to me like similar to the impeachment hearings, because we saw in the impeachment hearing, you had the impeachment counsel on the House side. They would lead some questioning at some point, which I think is a good thing, because sometimes politicians like the grandstand, shocker, and they get off topic and they start. This way, you have folks that are dedicated to basically prosecuting the case. So who are those folks? Is it outside counsel? Is it staff? Who are those folks going to be?
Yeah, it's mainly going to be senior investigative counsel attached to each of the different investigative teams, right? So the select committee has divided its investigation into like the gold team that's investigating Trump's inner circle, the purple team looking at militia groups, the red team looking at Stop the Steal. They have different teams, and each of the teams has its own senior investigative counsel and additional kind of committee counsel who are helping the investigative counsels lead the investigation. So the senior investigative counsels who have been talking to witnesses, who have been setting up depositions, who have been doing a lot of the groundwork ahead of the depositions, the closed door depositions with the witnesses, are going to be the ones again leading the questioning in the public hearings. And I think that's, as you say, really smart, because these are the guys who know the material inside out. A lot of them are career prosecutors. Some came from DOJ, some came from DHS, some came from private practice, but have, backgrounds as, former U.S. attorneys, assistant U.S. attorneys. And there's also some people from a number of congressional committees and a number of congressional offices. There's some people from the House Intelligence Committee who are really good at analyzing, intelligence. And reports from the intelligence community, and you also have people from the Department of Homeland Security who know how various agencies work. And so they've really pulled together this wealth of investigative talent, and they're going to be the ones who are going to shepherd the American public through the public testimony. And it's it is important because a lot of the members are very used to, as you say, like grandstanding, talking about what they want to talk about, having opening monologues. And the committee knows if they do that in these hearings, the public's just going to switch off, because then it's like any other congressional hearing. They need this to be like Watergate. They need this to be really punching in your face.
Absolutely. And speaking of that, I worry that the Democrats aren't prepared to do that. It feels almost like they've been training like a boxer, right? But they've been sparring in the ring with the sparring partner, but they still aren't quite ready to step into the ring with the real opponent. I worry that they aren't capable of that punch, because Republicans are very good at this. I often talk about the fact I was in these circles, Rick, when he's here, we always talk about like, we know the playbooks, and we know that Republicans will stop at nothing. There's no shame. They have no shame. And I'm hoping that the Democrats studied the way Republicans handled themselves in the impeachment hearings. They will lie, cheat, and steal. They don't care. The way they handled themselves during Benghazi. I was on the Hill during that. It's not like they don't know what could potentially be in front of them with the way that Republicans are going to handle this. So is there any indication that from the folks you've talked to that Democrats are concerned that they may not be able to have that same punch that we all hope that they do? Or do they feel pretty confident that they've got an explosive Watergate style presentation coming up?
What's really interesting is that the people on the receiving end of a lot of these, the committee subpoenas, like people in Bannon circles, people in Eastman circles, are really worried that the committee is going to have explosive hearings and that they're all going to get taken down because the committee wants to advance its narrative, which they say is obviously false or nonsense. The people who are doing the most worrying are Democrats on the Hill, worrying that the committee is not going to be explosive enough. It's a really interesting dynamic to see who's scared and who's not scared, and also scared for different reasons. But I think the way that Jamie Raskin in particular has teed these hearings up by saying, it's going to blow the roof off, is an indication of, I think, the committee's decision to really go after Republicans, or, that is the hope anyway, right? Like, him talking about, Pence and how Pence refused to get into the Secret Service cars because, he supposedly worried that he would be pulled away from the Capitol and the election wouldn't be certified. Him dripping these details out in his kind of public comments is an indication that I think they are going to go full throttle with their own narrative. And I think the other indication that's interesting is that they actually went ahead and subpoenaed Republicans. That, to me, was a litmus test for this committee. If the committee decided it was going to subpoena Republicans, that meant the gloves were off and that they were just going to go all the way. Because now they have nothing to lose. And so I think that was a very good indication, and actually brought me some relief in some respects that the committee is going to go punching its way through here.
Right. As we say in New Jersey, balls to the wall. I'll be a lot more irreverent about it, which is a good thing, because I think that so many people who are following this and have followed it from the beginning feel very strongly about the attack on our democracy and what we saw. I'll give you an example. In the hotel last night, I was watching the Jamie Raskin documentary on MSNBC. It happened to be on. Which is an excellent documentary, by the way. If you haven't seen it, you should watch it. Any of you guys out there, it is incredible, very well done. And he is an extraordinary human being with everything he went through with his family and his son taking his own life in the middle of all of that. It's unbelievable, the resilience. But his dedication to our democracy is without question impeccable. But watching the scenes, they showed scenes because it was contemporaneous, basically. They followed him around for like a year and a half. And watching the scenes again from January 6th, I was like, I tear up. I get so upset over it, because it's like, I cannot believe this happened. I cannot believe that our capital was defaced like this, that our democracy was under attack like this, and that Republicans didn't stand up to say enough. And they're still perpetuating this and trying to make it seem they're gaslighting America and make it seem like we're the people that have a problem by over exaggerating what happened. Like it is unfathomable to me. So when I look at them and I look at the committee going after McCarthy and Jordan and Biggs and Perry and Mo Brooks and these other like fellow lawmakers, people don't realize that's a big deal. Like usually you don't go, like lawmakers don't go after each other like that. So that tells me that they must have the goods on them, because they know they're not going to testify. But I feel like they have enough material where they can basically tell the story of these guys and what they were involved in absentia.
Yeah, and I mean, I will say a couple of things about these subpoenas. What I've heard over the course of my reporting is that the committee isn't really interested in enforcing these subpoenas. It does sound like the committee already knows what these members of Congress are up to, and subpoenaed them more out of like a sense of, checking the boxes, right? Like, we've interviewed everyone else. We have to at least, ask them to come in. And if they refuse our voluntary request for cooperation, which they did, then we should subpoena them, because that's what we've done for everyone else. This is the way you conduct a proper investigation. And so that's why they got the subpoenas. But the committee, is under no expectation that these members of Congress are going to just cooperate with subpoenas. This is not what they do. And so...
But it was the other way around, Hugo. I don't know if you were around when Benghazi happened, but I can tell you right now that if Democratic lawmakers or, Obama administration officials had behaved the way that these guys are, they would be screaming like banshees every single day about what an affront to Congress and the Constitution and rule of law this is. And they would never let it go. They still talk about Hillary's emails, for God's sakes.
We're still talking about Obama's tan suit, for God's sakes.
Right. That's right.
Like that was the crime of the century. But to your point, like the fact that they've subpoenaed them, expecting them to not cooperate, tells me they already have what they need. And the fact that they're not, talking about enforcing them, there was never really this discussion inside the committee about what we're going to do. Is it going to ruin our investigation if they don't, come and testify? Also suggests to me that they're laying down the markers for future Congresses to say, well, look, if you're not going to testify about your roles in an insurrection, which we have evidence of, then you can't expect Democrats to cooperate next Congress. And I think Republicans are aware of this. And for that reason, it may be that Republicans ultimately cooperate, not because they have a sense of duty to the Constitution or to the country or the democracy, but simply because they feel like they might lose that power next Congress. And I think that is also telling.
So cynical. It's also cynical. Gone are the days of ever just doing the right thing. Good God. Before I let you go, I wanted to ask you about a couple of people who have testified recently. You wrote a great story. You had a scoop on Rudy Giuliani. And I think that Rudy has fallen on some pretty tough times, and he's pretty much on an island right now. And I guess he figured, oh, fuck it, I guess I might as well go in and testify, and potentially protect himself from maybe criminal exposure, because there's multiple things going on here besides just the January 6th committee. You've got other, like what's happening in Georgia, and for example. Talk to us about what happened with Rudy.
Yeah, Rudy's in a difficult spot. I mean, it's become really complicated, these January 6 cases, whether it's with Georgia and the call about finding those votes that Trump made, or kind of the fact that the FBI has Rudy's phones from a separate investigation, or now that he's being subpoenaed by the January 6 committee. And also, by the way, he's now a target of the DOJ grand jury investigation into the alternate elector scheme. So Rudy's got himself a lot of exposure here. It basically sounds like what happened was Rudy's lawyer, who is also Bannon's lawyer, learned from last year when Bannon refused to cooperate and got held in contempt of Congress. He realized that this was not a particularly successful move for him. And so he told Giuliani that, look, you're going to actually have to go in and talk to them, even if you don't talk to them about anything substantial. And that's effectively what happened. According to my sources, Rudy went in for 7 hours. The majority of the discussion was about the claims and merits of election fraud and whether they were true or not, or whether he truly believed in them, which is really important, by the way, because what the committee is trying to do is establish the mens rea. They're trying to establish whether Giuliani was trying to mislead the president into doing something that was illegal because he was basing it upon lies of election fraud that he knew were false and were pretending were true. And so that guilty intent, or that intent, is really important. And I think that's what the committee was trying to get at for the majority of his deposition. But, the committee did ask him about his contacts with Republican members of Congress. And when I first reported the terms of the negotiation deal that Rudy was trying to negotiate with the committee, that was one of the things on the table. The committee told Rudy, look, we're not going to ask you to violate executive privilege. We're not going to ask you to violate attorney-client privilege. But we do expect you to talk about everything else. And when it came to everything else, which included his contacts with Republican members of Congress, Rudy told them, that's attorney work product. That's attorney-client privilege, which is a very dubious reading of that privilege, by the way, to avoid answering those questions. So it's difficult to know how much information
representing them, right? He wasn't technically representing them at the time.
Right. And it sounds like his whole thing was, since my work as a lawyer involved counseling the president on matters relating to Congress, they fit in the work product doctrine, which is very, very dubious.
Yeah.
But look, that's what he claimed. So
Right. Well, he can say that he went there in good faith and whatever. It didn't seem like there was anything explosive coming out of that. But I wasn't expecting it. But I was surprised that he actually did decide to cooperate. But it looks like you said, he screwed a lot of things.
Both of them saw what happened to Steve Bannon and said, that's really not something we want to deal with. We're already in the crosshairs of DOJ. Our phones have already been confiscated by the FBI. Like, they just did not want to go down that route.
And he's broke. So he didn't want to have to pay those legal fees.
Right.
That's the kicker here. I wanted to move on to your most recent story. I know you're working on it now, concerning Peter Navarro. He's another one of these guys who he spilled the beans a couple months ago on Ari Melber's show all about the Wisconsin sweep, or whatever the hell it was called, the Green Bay sweep, and what they were planning to do. And I don't know if he had a couple before he went on and just said, fuck it, I'm just going to tell the whole thing. But he basically laid it all out there. But he's been refusing to testify also. What's going on with Peter Navarro now? What's the latest with him?
So, the reason why Peter went on Ari Melber's show and talked about it is because he put most of it in his book. And so I think at that point he felt, well, it's already in the book, it's already in the public domain, whatever. And a lot of it had been reported by us and the Post and other people. And we didn't know that he had nicknamed it Green Bay Sweep, but there we are. The latest with him is that he had filed this morning a lawsuit against the January 6th committee, also enjoining the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia. What he's basically trying to say is the DOJ shouldn't be able to hold me in contempt because the underlying subpoena that I defied was invalid and unenforceable because the select committee isn't properly constituted. Now, that's an argument that has been repeatedly knocked down in multiple courts at the DC district level, the appellate level, and also the Supreme Court said all these claims about executive privilege and the fact that Biden can't waive executive privilege asserted by Trump is just nonsense. I mean, Nixon versus GSA says the former president has some ability to assert executive privilege, but it's the current president, president who has the ability to decide whether something's in the national interest or constitutes a national security concern.
That's
and in
right.
this case, Biden has decided it hasn't. And so that executive privilege claim, I think, is going to find a very difficult uphill battle.
It sounds to me like it's just a stalling tactic. It's just another way to delay until they're hoping that Republicans take back Congress and then this all goes away. I think that there's really no other explanation for it because they freaking know that it's not a viable legal argument. Like you just said, it's been struck down multiple times already. What do they think? They're going to roll the dice and a different judge is going to say something. I mean, it's a delay tactic, no doubt about that. Well, as we wrap this up, we saw that there was, Trump is in trouble again with the New York state attorney. The attorney general and her case. It doesn't have anything to do with January 6th, but it's still other legal problems for him. And then we have Merrick Garland and the DOJ. I think the big question that a lot of folks want to know is Merrick Garland actually going to do something? Because the January 6th committee can only present their facts, what they found. It's basically a fact-finding commission. They can't prosecute anyone. They can refer to the DOJ, right? But it's up to Merrick Garland to actually prosecute anyone for anything. What are you hearing about Merrick Garland? Does the committee think that they have enough here for the DOJ to actually move forward prosecuting some of these people?
I think the DOJ is moving very aggressively. I mean, one of the things that came out in Navarro's lawsuit filed this morning was that he was served with a grand jury subpoena last Thursday. That is a huge deal. I went back and looked at that grand jury subpoena. I actually have it. And I've seen the numbers. And the grand jury number on his subpoena is a brand new number. We've not seen it in any other subpoena for any other grand jury, which suggests to me that the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia has impaneled a new grand jury that is looking at Navarro or in a separate investigation that we don't know of yet. There's now at least 4 grand jury investigations into things connected to January 6th. We know there was the grand jury, ostensibly for Bannon for his contempt charge. We know there's a grand jury looking at the Stop the Steal activities leading up to January 6th. That's for Ali Alexander and Alex Jones. We know there's a grand jury investigation looking at the alternate electors scheme, of which, targets include Rudy Giuliani, Boris Epstein, Keita Mitchell, Victoria Tensing, Janet Ellis, those kind of people. And now we have this new grand jury, which we're not really sure what the aim is, right? I thought originally that grand jury investigation was to see whether they can mount a contempt case against Navarro. But the more I look at it, and if you look at the subpoena, it's asking for communications with Donald Trump, which suggests to me that the DOJ is nearing Trump's inner circle, which is a really big deal. And I'll write about this today, actually. The moment I get off this, I'm going to write about it. But I think DOJ is moving pretty aggressively now. And these grand juries being impaneled is a sign to the committee to wrap their investigation up and send to the DOJ what they already have. And I think the committee has heeded that call. And this is why we're actually doing the hearings in June. They're not getting pushed further down the line. Right. And their final report is not going to be about criminal referrals so much as legislative actions, because the committee knows now that DOJ is actually investigating, criminal acts by people around Trump, that they can now hand off to DOJ knowing that DOJ is going to do something.
That is very interesting because, a lot of people have been complaining because Merrick Garland has been very slow and steady here. But slow and steady wins the race. And as frustrating as it may seem to us on the outside, if you know how investigations unfold, they're very methodical, particularly at that level. And Merrick Garland is known for running a very tight ship and being very methodical. So I've always held out hope that there's stuff going on behind the scenes that we're not quite aware of, because there's just no way that they're sitting on their hands or they're not being aggressive in this. There's just no way I could believe that. So you letting us know that you saying that you think that DOJ is acting aggressively, and the fact that there's literally like 4 separate grand juries going on now.
At least 4 grand juries. I mean, we could be up to 10. I mean, wow. If you look at we just don't know. But if you look at some of the numbers run from like 3 to 10. So there could be other grand juries that have been impaneled that are not related to January 6th. There are other things, but there are a very large number of grand juries related to January 6th that are being impaneled kind of weeks after each other. We had a grand jury subpoena that went out May 5, and then we have a new grand jury subpoena that went out May 26. And in between them, we seem to have at least 2 grand juries. So we just don't know who's being subpoenaed and targeted for what at this point.
And let's not forget, Mark Meadows is still in here somewhere. You know?
Right.
So, well, that is very interesting, Hugo. Thank you so much. You're doing a great job. And I hope everyone follows you on Twitter, read your stuff at The Guardian, and keep up the great work.
Well, thanks so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Hugo. Well, that is a good note to end on, actually, that there's some hope, folks. Do not give up hope. DOJ is doing their job. I know sometimes it doesn't seem like it, but they're doing their job. So let's keep our fingers crossed and stay vigilant. Can't even talk today. Vigilant. All right. Well, that's it for today's show. Before we go, though, I want to show something that LP has put out. With, this JD Vance out in Ohio, he is the absolute freaking worst. Besides the stuff he said about porn and the shooter last week in Texas, which is just craziness, he's also had some other things. He's really turned himself into this mega MAGA man of the people. But we all know that that's a bunch of bullshit. And LP is reminding you why. Check it out.
JD Vance thinks you are stupid, that he can fool you. When the opioid crisis struck Ohio, what did JD Vance do?
Things that I care most about are the opioid crisis.
He went to work for the drug dealers. His law firm lobbied for Purdue Pharma, the people who peddled Oxy to America.
No, I'm okay with that.
JD Vance created a scam charity to fight opioid abuse. They called him the Rust Belt Fraud.
Part of me wonders, do they think I just give off a used car salesman vibe?
What kind of man helps the drug company that has destroyed thousands of Ohio families? JD Vance, a phony, a fraud, and a liar. His hillbilly elegy ended when he made millions and bought a mansion in San Francisco.
I was looking for my way out.
JD Vance is laughing at you, laughing at Ohio.
How could I not be?
With JD Vance, the joke's on us.
The Lincoln Project paid for and is responsible for the content of this advertising.
Like I said, the freaking worst, JD Vance. But Abe is watching. We're not going to let you get away with the BS. All right. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure you check out We're Speaking tomorrow night at 7. And of course, tune in Thursday for the incomparable, fantastic, wonderful Randy Rainbow, who will be with me. And if you watch The View, check me out on The View. I'll be on Wednesday and Thursday as well. Have a great evening, everyone. And get involved in your local elections, your congressional elections, whatever elections are going on in your community. Get involved. It's the only way we can change this. See you next time.